There are three stages in a woman's life when her need for connection with a man becomes much more intense. The harsh reality explained in depth. There are three very specific moments in a woman's life when the desire to be in a relationship increases considerably. And this doesn't happen by chance. It's not just emotional, it's also psychological and biological. If you're a man who doesn't understand these stages, you'll continue to misinterpret women's behavior time and time again. Many men believe that women seek relationships in the same way throughout their lives, but that idea is completely wrong. Science shows a very different reality. Developmental psychologists at the University of Chicago studied how women's motivation in relationships changes with age and found something that is almost never openly discussed. A woman's desire for a partner doesn't remain constant. It clearly intensifies in three specific and predictable stages. And most importantly, what she wants in each of those phases changes completely. What they discovered even surprised several of the researchers. Let's start with the first stage, between the ages of 18 and 22. This is the exploration phase. During this period, the prefrontal cortex, the region of the brain responsible for planning and long-term decisions, is still developing. Therefore, much of her attention is focused on the present. She seeks experiences, romance, and emotional intensity. She isn't thinking too much about where she'll be in 5 years. She's focused on what excites her right now. At this stage, she's not usually looking for a lifelong committed relationship. She's accumulating experiences, and the type of man she's attracted to tends to reflect exactly that. A man who brings excitement, energy, and enthusiasm to the present. But this is where everything starts to change. The second stage occurs between the ages of 25 and 30. This is where many things begin to transform. Her environment changes, her friends start getting married, and people close to her begin starting families. At the same time, what many call the biological clock, something neuroscientists confirm exists and is not simply a social myth, begins to create a silent but constant sense of urgency. Researchers at Columbia University, analyzing female attachment and bonding patterns, discovered that during this stage, women stop seeking only emotional connection. They begin, often unconsciously, to evaluate men from a different perspective. Now they look at long-term potential, stability, character, and future security. The same woman who at 21 pursued intense emotions begins at 28 to value reliability. That's why, if you've ever seen a woman suddenly change her expectations or raise her standards, it didn't happen by chance. There's a reason behind that change. And then comes the third stage, between 38 and 45. This is probably the most misunderstood phase of all. By this point in life, she has lived long enough to have clarity. She has built something of her own. Perhaps she's already experienced love, heartbreak, or even both. And then she arrives at what many women consider one of the most important and revealing moments of their lives. Her priorities shift again. She's no longer trying to impress anyone. She's looking for emotional security, not necessarily in financial terms, but in the emotional peace a person can offer her. She begins to value stability, presence, and authenticity. Psychologists call this the shift toward authenticity. At this stage, superficial attraction loses much of its power, and emotional depth becomes what truly matters. Now, this is the reality every man should understand. If you meet a woman at any of these stages and don't understand what she truly needs at that point in her life, you'll end up taking her behavior personally. You'll think she's complicated or inconsistent, but the truth is, she isn't. She's simply reacting to a phase of life that no one taught you to understand. And here's the hard truth. A woman who seems deeply connected to you at one stage can naturally drift away at another. Not necessarily because you've done something wrong, but because her needs have changed over time. The men who manage to avoid confusion and disappointment are those who understand this pattern. They don't rely solely on the right moment. They build connections based on a genuine understanding of the other person. Because in the end, the real question was never, what does she want? The real question was always, what stage of her life is she in right now? And if this idea